Doug McIntyre here. I'm one of the editors of ClimateCrisis247, and we've got David Calloway, who's the other editor. We're going to talk about something that happened a long time ago, which was a suit against Big Tobacco, which basically sort of brought them to their knees financially, but it was also probably good for the health of the entire country. The penalties were massive. And could that happen to big oil? The theory behind this is actually sort of simple. Did these guys know a long time ago about the damage to the climate? And if so, why did they sort of cover it up? So, Dave, what do you think about that?
Well, I think there's ample evidence that they've known for decades. That the scientists working for big oil and some of the big firms, Exxon, Chevron, have known for decades about the dangers of pollution and the drilling that they've been doing to the climate and and to the health of the various communities around where they're drilling. Whether it's enough to affect a series of lawsuits like we saw with the attorneys generals and big tobacco back in the 20 years ago is another matter, Doug. I think first of all, to win these lawsuits, you have to show direct evidence of damage, and in the tobacco lawsuits, you had people dying. And so far, the climate advocates have not been able to effectively link the pollution to people dying. They've linked it to climate change and extreme heat and things like wildfires and flooding. But that direct link to individual deaths is going to be a little trickier. And I think what we're going to see in some of these lawsuits is it's going to come down to something like that.
Now, you're in California. And your attorney general, he decided to take this leap recently. I'm curious, though, when you look at that, what do you think that he had in the back of his mind when he made that decision? Did he think, I'll give this a shot and maybe I have a chance? Or do you think he looked at it and said, I can get into court and win big and the other states will come in and join me?
I think there's a combination of both. It's obviously, there's some politics involved, and California Governor Newsom is staked his claim on the climate anti-oil, even though we have more drilling here in California than most other states outside of Texas. Gavin Newsom has staked his claim to the climate side. So I see, there's some politics there, but I think they do think that there is some sort of case. And we're going to start to see more and more of these cases develop. If you remember last year, we had the famous Montana 16 case where a bunch of kids from Montana sued the state government for violating their constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment, which is in this Montana state constitution. They went after the government there, and their attorney, who I spoke with just last month, said that they're going to go after, they're going to broaden their campaign nationwide in the coming year or so. But they're not going directly after the oil companies. The folks who are going to go after the oil companies, the attorney general, this is a big first step, I think, that California took.
Now, we don't know who the next president will be, but there's a chance that if a Democrat is elected, that this may become a national attorney general issue. You can certainly see the government looking at that closely. Is this something that the federal government might look at and say, we can look at this on a national basis. We've got the capacity to file a lawsuit in federal court as the federal government?
I think if you see Biden specifically win a second term, where he doesn't have to worry about re-election again, you'll see, them the government become much more attack dog like in this situation. And to that extent, I think California's suit is prescient, and they are hoping that they will be used as an example in either several states coming on board or eventually some sort of federal lawsuit. Now we've seen big oil lose in courts in Europe before, so there's no doubt that they're worried. And if you noticed, last month, Exxon actually sued in court to
Yes.
stop some climate advocates who had accumulated some shares of Exxon from putting together a proxy question on their annual ballot this year. So, they're circling the wagons. They're buying there's a major consolidation going on in the oil and shale industries right now. We just saw another one this week, another deal this week, a $26 billion deal. So, they certainly are circling the wagons. Whether they're really concerned about these lawsuits and how quickly they might hit is another matter.
Well, there's an old saying, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. And it appears that the big oil companies are the M&A activities now are in the hundreds of billions of dollars, that they think that drill is an incredibly promising future. So it looks like they don't care about the government at all.
Yeah, or that they certainly are thinking that the government's not going to be able to make enough inroads in the time it takes before they can drill the rest of the oil out of the ground. I mean, we're really seeing it's in the U.S. in particular, Doug. There's a massive consolidation. The folks who are going to, drill the rest of these shale fields and oil fields, under the argument that it makes the U.S. More energy sufficient, it's benefiting their shareholders. Their shares are going up. It's benefiting their profits. Their profits are going up. And the whole thing has a feel of kind of, this is the last inning and we're just going to get as much out of it as we can and go down swinging.
Is there a half measure that the government or governments can take where they end up not getting money from the big oil companies, but they get very substantial environmental concessions? Is that a sort of a middle way for the government?
I think it is, Doug. There is, and it's why you're seeing the oil industry invest in things like carbon capture and removal, right? Any sort of, the oil companies have been doing that for decades, actually, and now that it's becoming more of a thing on Wall Street to actually take carbon out of the air and ocean and store it somewhere or turn it into something, the oil, companies are raising their hand. I think they're going to want to be able to point to that during any future litigation or future, kind of remedial, punitive measures.
From a public relations standpoint, which may not help them in court at all, every single oil company, if you go to their website, corporate website, the first thing you see is we're the greenest guys in history. And I'm not kidding you. If you go to like the Exxon or Chevron websites, all they talk about is they're going to take every dime they've got and like turn it into wind or solar.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't get it. And I understand why they're doing it, but I don't understand why they think anybody would buy it. Do you?
I don't. I mean, they obviously think if they can show that, develop carbon capture technology, they can just keep drilling as long as they're taking the carbon out of the air. It still presents a host of other problems, as of what to do, what happens to the oil after they drill it. Well, it gets burned. So remember when BP like 20 years ago was like turned into the green company and redid its logo from British Petroleum. Then it had that massive spill in the Gulf of Mexico and all that was out the window. I think this is more of the same, the so-called greenwashing, by portraying this carbon capture, which is an unproven technology at scale. But they're doing it for a reason, and the reason is that they may be required to do more environmentally efficient things down the line by a court of law.
So I take it your conclusion is that there may be some of these lawsuits either through the state's attorneys general or maybe even the federal government, but that there may not be enough proof, as there was with tobacco, that you had companies that knew there was a danger, but there isn't that direct link to somebody smoking a cigarette and dying compared to drilling for oil and gas in a way that's hazardous to the environment. But you can't point to people and say, all those people died directly because of this.
That's going to be one of the major legal sticking points, I think. I mean, you're going to be able to point to some people, they're polluting the waters and stuff like that. But it's not the direct link that tobacco has.
Good to talk to you about this. I'll see you soon.
All right, Doug.
Take it easy.